So, how do we actually think? How do we reason? How do we actually learn stuff? So, this is going to be a full blueprint. It's a long one, I know, but I'm going to be walking you through four mental models on how to become a genius autodidact in 2025. So, I hope you enjoy. I had a lot of fun filming this one, and yeah. This is something that people just don't teach us at school. And I learned how to think or am continuously learning because again, this is just me documenting my journey. And so far what I've come to learn, how I am personally learning to think and just thinking in general and reasoning has just been through experimentation and through just this deep thirst for knowledge, this unquenchable curiosity that I have for everything, for learning everything. And it's not just, reading books and stuff. It's not just learning about philosophy, science, and all that stuff. I also want to just do stuff in life, right? I also want to learn how to learn martial arts. Um, I even approach the same thinking to my physical training. I don't just want to lift weights. I don't just want to get stronger. I also want to get faster. I want to improve all the dimensions, all the physical dimensions of a human being, right? Not just strength, not just aesthetics, right? Not just muscle mass, but also your stamina, your endurance, not just those areas as well, but also your speed, your agility, your foot coordination. Those are things that a lot of people don't talk about, unless of course you're an athlete, unless of course you're like a soccer player or an American, a touch football player. Foot coordination, right? A lot of people don't talk about that unless you're a boxer, right? But all of those things are part of the entire physical domain that I also want to train. I want to learn all those things. Maybe learn acrobatics and all these things. I think that we should all aspire to learn these areas. I think we're just missing out in so many ways that we can enhance the human experience, enhance the way we experience the human experience, right? And it's the same thing with thinking. It all starts with thinking, really. So, how do we actually think? Following the flowchart, let me introduce you to what I like to call our first mental model, which what I like to call experimental thinking. So, here's the thing with thinking. Many people don't talk about this, but there are many ways to think. Many ways to think. Many people assume that there's only one way to think. Many people assume that, oh wow, this guy is such a genius, right? Because he solved this problem in such a creative way. They think they're just like the idea of being a genius or the idea of researching or the idea of creativity is just something that is out there that some people are born with and other people are not. And no, it all boils down to behavior. It all boils down to pattern, to actions, to habits. Habits is the key word right there. What are their thinking habits? So, my thinking habits. So, yes, some people have a natural disposition for a particular set of thinking habits for whatever reason, but that doesn't mean that we cannot acquire them, right? So, like, my particular thinking habits is something that I'm eventually going to talk about, which is called first principles thinking. Because ever since I was little, I doubted everything. Like, this is why I admire philosophers like Rene Descartes. I doubted everything, and I try to question the roots of all human experience, the meaning of life, God's existence, everything. So now I have a bit more clarity on things, but I'm still learning. So much to learn out there. Famous saying from Socrates is like, all I know is that I know nothing, right? We just continuously experience, continuously expanding our consciousness. Anyway, so that is a particular set of habits that I've installed in my life ever since I was little. One of the particular models that I am still developing is known as experimental thinking, which might actually be it might actually be a thinking pattern that other people actually, are very strong, like already have a predisposition for experimental thinking, right? And what is experimental thinking? So experimental thinking is as the name implies, it's experimental thinking. It's really just prioritizing experience over theory. This is why I put this X, greater than the. It just means experience over theory, right? Experience greater than theory. That's all it is. And what does this A, B means? It means that you're focusing on, so right now you're at A and you want to get to B. You're focusing on the most efficient path to get there. That's really all it is. So there's a million ways you can get to B, but there's one particular way that's just obvious, or maybe not so obvious, but a tested and proven way that everyone has already tested, and you just go straight to B. So for example, I don't know, like most people would probably study for an exam. What could be a good example? Like, okay, I'm going to learn how to cook, so I am going to watch a video online called How to Cook. It's going to be a full guide, maybe an hour long guide on how to cook. I'm going to replicate the guy. I'm going to observe, right? Experience, and I'm going to replicate. I'm going to observe, and then I'm going to mimic him. So, the same thing when we're learning to ride our bikes, right? I'm observing, and then I'm all of a sudden replicating. So I'm not gonna read 100 books on how to read a bike. No, I'm gonna get a bike and I'm gonna try to ride it, right? That's how you learn how to ride a bike. You don't read 1,000 books on how to learn how to ride a bike. It's the same thing, right? It's absurd to read 1,000 books because everyone says, "Oh, reading is amazing. Reading is good. You should read 100 books," but it's like, no, bro, no. Reading, yes, reading is amazing, but reading is just one particular thinking model, right? We don't want to overexert a particular thinking model because then you're going to underdevelop other thinking models like experimental thinking. Maybe some things you just really need to experiment. And this is very, very, very common in the self-improvement world, where people are reading hundreds of self-help books, right? And of course, it's absurd to read 100 books on how to ride your bicycle, right? Everyone could pretty much agree with that. But what's funny is that self-help, right? The self-help world, or starting a business and all that, a lot of it is actually 99% of it is experimental, and yet there's a lot of people who end up reading hundreds of books on how to start a business and never actually start a business or never actually start improving their lives because they want the perfect plan to do it, right? But of course, they don't think that's absurd. They would think it would be absurd if I were to do that for learning a bicycle, but they don't do the same thing when it comes to improving their lives or starting a business, for example. And it's just very interesting, and that's why that industry makes a lot of money. But like the people who sell those books and all that. Now I'm not, mind you, like there's a lot of self-help books that are actually really helpful, but there's a lot of books out there that are just junk, really. But some of them, only a couple of them, a few of them are actually really, really helpful. Probably like Power of Habits. It's probably one of the best ones you could read. But my favorite is an ancient good old book called Meditations by Marcus Aurelius. In my opinion, that's the only book, self-help book you need. But like when it comes to like self-improvement and all that. But anyways, nothing but good old ancient wisdom, right? So, but there are some books that you actually need to read if you want to improve certain areas. Like if you want to learn philosophy, then of course you're going to have to read books, right? But anyways, experimental thinking. It's all about experimenting, man. Like, bro, take something that you want. If you want to learn how to code, if you want to learn AI, if you want to learn how to use AI or how to learn AI, don't spend a bunch of money on 10 artificial intelligence books or courses. People go out there online trying to, spend hundreds of dollars, maybe even thousands of dollars on the perfect course on AI, right? There's nothing wrong with courses, right? There's nothing wrong with courses. Courses are good. I've done courses. Courses are nothing wrong with courses. What I criticize is having these Python courses that, or these courses that teach you so much theory, but very, very little practice. I prefer for you to me just, okay, if you can really synthesize just the main idea of programming in Python, for example, the main ideas, the basic components that will give me the tools that I need to just start whatever project I need to start. That's what the courses should do. Like, it shouldn't go on hours and hours teaching you all the theory behind Python or Java, or whatever programming language you like. And then all of a sudden, then I'll do a project. As soon as I understand everything, then I'll start working on a project. It's like, no. First, learn the basics. Learn what a loop is, a variable is. Um, Learn the different data types, a string data type, integer. Just learn the basics. Shouldn't take you more than an hour. And then focus on a project. Like, okay, what can I actually learn basic with these basic concepts that I have? You can actually use ChatGPT to do this. You could ask, hey, ChatGPT, I've learned these basic stuff, right? I learned what a function is. I learned what data types are, what for loops are. Okay, so how can I use this? And how can I, give me some project ideas that only involve these three things I learned? And then ChatGPT will literally give you a list of ideas. And then just take one of those ideas and execute. Maybe it might be a simple calculator. And then, start experimenting. You might not know how to or where to begin. Use Google. That's what Google is for. Like, type in, you might not want to type in how to build a calculator, or else you'll give away the answer, right? But you want to start thinking, okay, so what does a calculator do, right? A calculator, well, calculates. It can add numbers. It can multiply numbers. Okay, so there's a different, like a variety of calculators out there, right? We got calculators that can add up a bunch of numbers, maybe calculators that can only add two numbers. Let's start off with a very, very simple calculator that only adds up two numbers, or that only multiplies two numbers. Okay, how can I multiply two numbers? How can I create a machine that can take in two variables and then spit out the result of that multiplication? Oh wait, a machine, that sounds familiar. That's called a function, right? Okay, how do I write a function again? Oh, you start off with def. You know what I'm saying? Like, that is what it means to think experimentally. And there's no set in stone path to do this. It takes practice. That's why it's called experimental thinking. This is actually a skill. Skills require practice. So I cannot give you a 1,000 page book on experimental thinking. That's not going to help you. This is why I decided to just make this diagram. This diagram and the basic concept behind it is all you need, literally, for experimental thinking. It's literally just learning how to take a concept and experiment, do stuff with it. What is learning? Learning is just same condition, new behavior. That's all it is in the realm of experimental thinking. In the realm of experimental thinking, that is what learning is. Same condition, new behavior. If you do not change your behavior, you have not learned. So kind of like isolate yourself with a particular set of conditions, and if you've changed your behavior, you have learned. And you might want to adjust your behavior to get a desired outcome. Moving on. So let's talk about synthetic thinking, right? So synthetic thinking is very similar to experimental thinking, but it's actually a thinking model that a lot of us are, some of us are very used to. Especially maybe those people that are like in the self-improvement space, or like want to have the perfect plan or the perfect course that teaches me how to write or teaches me how to code or whatever. Or what is the perfect training plan in order for me to lose 10 pounds, right? What is the perfect training plan in order for me to gain muscle? The perfect training plan. This idea of the perfect plan is all about synthetic thinking. It's literally all synthetic thinking because it's a habit of synthesizing. We're using the habits of synthesizing. We human beings are very, very, very good at synthesizing stuff. We can take this experience, that fact, this idea and we can connect it. We can like combine all those ideas, all those experience, and create a new idea, a new experience. That is called synthesizing, and we're very, very good at doing that. This is why I created this diagram where there's an A here, A here, A here, and we combine it to create B. In this particular model, we're prioritizing theory over experience. So we get a whole bunch of people saying, no, you need to focus on action, 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 work, work, work. Forget about thinking. No, you just have to take action. And yes, they are right. You have to take action until they're not right, until you don't, until you're not supposed to do that, until you're actually supposed to sit and actually think. Because we get people saying like, oh, you need to stop thinking and you actually need to get to work. And that is true in certain cases. If you're doing philosophy, for example, the main thing you have to do is think, right? If you're a scientist, you got to think. If you're a programmer, you actually got to sit down and work and think, right? So you can see how you actually have to learn how to balance or learn when to use these particular thinking models. For some people, it's very natural. For others, it's not. But I believe that if we can really demystify this idea of thinking and really just understand the patterns behind it, we're able to actually find actionable solutions, like find actual actions that we can implement in our lives, actual habits, so that we can actually become better thinkers, whether that be experimental or synthetic thinking. There's no such thing as I'm just going to be an experimental thinker. I'm just going to be a synthetic thinker. No, we all use all models of thinking basically in our lives. We're just not aware of that. We're not aware exactly of how we're doing it because it's become so mechanical. This is why people feel overwhelmed with mathematics. This is why some people feel overwhelmed with history, or some people feel overwhelmed with philosophy, because a lot of these subjects require different models of thinking, and that's not just in the academics. Same applies in when you're learning how to drive your car, when you're learning how to code, how to write, or when you're training, right? When you're improving your body, right? When you're researching nutrition and all that. Same thing. So synthetic thinking is all about synthesizing different ideas to create a new idea. And that is why if we were to take this particular thinking model to the extreme, right? Remember, this is theory over experience. So if we were to take this to the extreme, that is where this idea of looking for the perfect plan comes into play. Because what we're trying to do is we're trying to get as much information as possible from everywhere, from a bunch of resources. And that's, I don't know if this happened to you, but like for example, if you're trying to lose weight, we're watching hundreds of videos on how to lose weight, right? We're trying to get a whole bunch of ideas, and we're trying to create the perfect plan, right? This B is the perfect plan, where we're synthesizing all of these ideas to create the perfect plan. So if you want to lose weight, that's not what you're supposed to do. If you want to lose weight, use experimental thinking. Get to work, right? Action, experience over theory. But this thinking model is not necessarily a bad thinking model. It's actually a good thinking model. Many people think this is a bad thing. No, this is a good thing. But it's not, a lot of us don't use it in the proper context. So this model shouldn't be used to lose weight or to learn how to code. This model should be used for learning to code or losing weight and that kind of stuff. But this model should be used for things that are more high risk. That's something people don't talk about, because if you were to use this thinking model for learning how to, I don't know, for like, I don't know, the first thing that comes to mind is the movie or the series Money Heist. If any of you have watched that movie or series, that Netflix series where basically they're trying to heist a bank or something or whatever. It's been forever since I've watched it. They can't really use experimental thinking, right? They actually need to create the perfect plan. In fact, that's the whole premise of Money Heist. Why? Because the risk is high. If they don't have a really, really, really rigorous plan, then they are risking their lives. They're risking the possibility of going to jail forever, right? Going to prison forever. So that's a very high risk. So they really need to create the perfect plan. they're not going to be able to rely on experimental thinking. Now that's just an extreme example, but you know what I'm saying. Like if it's something that's high risk, like um, maybe I don't know, jumping off of an airplane, you probably, or like learning how to fly an airplane, for example, you're probably going to have to read some theory. You're really going to have to sit down and read some theory from instructors, right? Some people that know their stuff, and really listen to them and make notes, and actually memorize the facts and understand the facts, most importantly. More importantly than memorizing, because it's high risk. And then you're eventually going to have to get to experience. I'm not saying that you shouldn't experience. I'm saying that theory comes first and then experience because of the high risk when it comes to synthetic thinking. So that is important. And a lot of companies use synthetic thinking, right? Especially when it comes to like cybersecurity, for example, or NASA, for example. You know, here's a interesting fact. So NASA is the perfect example of an organization that used synthetic thinking over experimental thinking when it came to developing rockets. SpaceX actually threw away synthetic thinking and they used experimental thinking. And sometimes you have to experiment between experimental thinking and synthetic thinking to find out which one is actually the better model to use. NASA used synthetic thinking. They made a lot of progress, but the costs were high. They used a lot of money, burned a lot of cash, and they made progress, but not as much as SpaceX, for example. SpaceX used experimental thinking. They were like, let's throw away the math. Well, they didn't throw away the math, obviously, but they're like, let's focus on, this is a very, very, this is more of an engineering problem rather than a physics problem. So let's actually focus on experimenting, on trying things out, trying different parameters, trying different models, and taking note of what works and what doesn't work. That's what SpaceX did. Obviously, they had a system to do this, obviously. And they obviously didn't throw away all theory. Obviously not. But that's just an example of how they prioritize more experience and trying things out over synthetic. You may think that synthetic thinking is something that we should be using in this case because it's high risk, right? We're risking we're risking millions of dollars. Again, there's no set in stone between which model you should use. Some models are some situations are very obvious, right? It's like some situations are just very obvious. Like for example, the extreme example I gave with Money Heist, right? With the Netflix series Money Heist. But sometimes it's not going to be so clear. And sometimes you're just going to have to try different mental models. But the idea is to try, right? All right, third mental model. We're cooking. So, axiomatic thinking. I love this thinking model. Axiomatic thinking. What is that? Sounds very fancy, right? So, axiomatic thinking. First of all, what is an axiom? In mathematics, an axiom is just an assumption, right? We're just assuming it's just something that it's a starting point basically. We're starting with something. We're starting with an assumption. We have to start somewhere. So, I would like to give an example. Let's see if I can get an example from the internet. So, for example, geometry basic axioms. The axioms of the axioms of Euclid, yeah. Let's see if we can get some Euclidean axioms here. Here it is. So it is possible to draw a straight line from any point to any point. It is possible to produce a finite straight line continuously in a straight line. It is possible to describe a circle with any sense. So all of these are just axioms. All of this is just they're axioms. They're just assumptions that we're starting off with, or they're starting points basically. We define our terms, what a point is, what a line is, what a plane is, and then we build from there. We start, now that we have these starting points, then we can derive other bodies of knowledge. In mathematics, when you're deriving something from a set of axioms, that is called a theorem. That is what a theorem is basically. Basically, how can I, whatever. So that is what a theorem is in mathematics, and that's just math, right? This can apply in everything as well, even philosophy, even theology, and all that, especially philosophy. So it's like, okay, Rene Descartes did this, right? Rene Descartes tried to define a starting point. So his starting point was his own existence. I think, therefore I am, and from that he was able to derive other, or he tried to derive other things that he could be certain of. So axiomatic thinking is a very interesting type of thinking because we're starting off from first principles. A very interesting video I recommend is, by the way, this is an article where I dive deeper into, this is just my Substack where I dive deeper into these mental models, but I recommend this video called by Autodidact where he's learning mathematics the axiomatic style. This is something that I really, really admire about him because this is something that we're not taught at school. We're not taught to learn mathematics the axiomatic method. And for a good reason, because it's not a very practical method of thinking. It's not practical. It guarantees certainty. It guarantees understanding, deep understanding about a subject, but it's a very, very slow method of thinking. Physics is another example. If you're learning physics, you start off with concept. You could start off with like the concept of time, with space and matter, what a particle is, energy, right? You start off with certain principles, and then you can use mathematics to derive other principles or theories in physics. Very common in physics. Very common in computer science, theoretical computer science, right? So this type of thinking is, honestly, it's not the most practical thinking method, but it's very worth mentioning. If you're a guy that is, or a girl that is interested in learning mathematics, I highly recommend axiomatic thinking. Instead of learning mathematics, by learning how to add numbers and then jumping out, learning pre-algebra, then algebra, then learning the high school method, like that's the high school way to learn mathematics. Then learning calculus, AB calculus, BC calculus. Instead of doing that, I recommend thinking in terms of axioms, okay, so what is a derivative, right? So a derivative is just the rate of change. Okay, what does that look like? What is a function really? Is a function a relationship? What does it mean for something to be a relationship? Or relation, right? What are the real numbers? What's a complex number? Well, before we can understand complex numbers, we have to understand what the real numbers are. But to understand that, we have to understand the natural numbers. But where do they even come from? Is it just basic intuition? Why is 2 plus 2 equal to 4? How do we actually prove that? How can we formalize the idea of 2 plus 2 being equal to 4? There's actually a way you can formalize these ideas. They sound very intuitive, like of course 2 plus 2 equals 4. It's just two things, take another two things, and then you add them and you get 4. But what does it mean to add, right? We haven't defined addition. We haven't even defined the number 2, right? Think about it. How do you define the number 2? Oh, the number 2 is just when you have two things. No, when you say the number 2 is when you have two things, you're already presupposing the definition of the number 2. You see the problem there? You haven't formally defined the number 2. And you haven't formally defined the idea of adding things. See, that's actually a very, very deep problem, which can actually be solved through something called set theory. And set theory has its own axioms, right? And you can use the axioms in set theory to derive the idea of addition, the real numbers, these things that they don't really teach you in school, but later on when you're more advanced in college, which again, I can understand why they do that because it's not a very practical way to learn mathematics. But I do believe if you aspire to learn mathematics or be a mathematician or whatnot, I highly recommend learning mathematics through the axiomatic style. And the reason why the education system frustrates me, so it's like, yes, I understand why they don't teach us mathematics the axiomatic way, but it still frustrates me that there are students that want to learn mathematics the axiomatic way. So they don't have a tailored path for students that want to do that. and everyone is different. Everyone has a different way of thinking. Some people are very axiomatic thinkers. Other people are very experimental thinkers. Other people are very synthetic thinkers. So the education doesn't, and I can understand why. Like, I'm not saying there's a conspiracy behind this. I'm just saying I understand, like, there are operational complexities to this, right? Because they have to tailor for all students. But and this is where I get into, AI. I believe AI can solve the personalization problem in the education system. I believe that AI can help us, can accommodate students to adapt a particular mental model. Like, if I want to learn, hey, I want to learn mathematics, I should probably adopt this method of thinking. I should really develop the habits of axiomatic thinking. Because what is axiomatic thinking? It's basically thinking in first principle. It's basically starting from the ground and building your way up. Excuse me, you're starting off from a set of axioms, and you're building a particular body of knowledge. You're starting with the Lego bricks, and then you're using the Lego bricks to build something. If axiomatic thinking sounds abstract or a bit alien, it's because not many areas use axiomatic thinking. While experimental thinking can be applied to literally anything, whether an academic subject, fitness, gardening, or whatever, axiomatic thinking is something that is usually exclusive only to mathematics, logic, theoretical computer science, physics, economic theory, analytical philosophy, systematic theology, just to name a few. So here's actually an example of axiomatic thinking. Again, it's the same example, the geometry example that I laid out earlier. So a straight line can be drawn from any point to any other point. So a finite straight line can be extended infinitely in both directions. A circle can be drawn with any center. So basically, we have a point right here, we have a point right here, we can draw a straight line. Pretty straightforward. We can have that same line extend infinitely in both directions. This is just geometry, right? A circle can be defined as we have a point, we have a radius. A radius, we could imagine it being a line, an imaginary line right over here that I can just rotate to create a circle. All right angles are equal to each other. If you don't know what a right angle is, that's what Google is for. It is an angle that measures to 90 degrees, and this is how you can visualize it. If a line intersects two lines and makes the sum of the interior angles on one side less than two right angles, the two lines, if extended indefinitely, will meet on that side. So I have no idea what this is. It's been a while since I've done geometry, so let's just search it up. Oh yeah, and as soon as we can actually visualize it, it becomes pretty straightforward. So if we have these two lines over here, so if we have this line over here that intersects these two lines, and their interior angles are less than 90 degrees, right? This angle right here is less than 90 degrees. This one is less, actually, let's see. If a line intersects two lines and makes the sum of the interior angles, okay, so the sum of the interiors on one side less than two right angles, okay, gotcha. So if the sum of these, of the interior, are less than the sum of two right angles, so if we were to sum a 90-degree angle with another 90-degree angle, we get 180 degrees. But if the sum of the interior angles over here are less than the sum of two right angles, then those two lines will eventually meet at this particular point. So that's basically what it's saying. That's really all it's saying. And you may be asking, okay, what are these axioms for? Well, from these axioms, these assumptions, these basic assumptions, we can derive other bodies of knowledge, other concepts. We can derive, for example, the theorem that states the sum of the angles in a triangle is 180 degrees, right? Opposite angles of intersecting lines are equal. And we can just derive other theorems. Now, like practically speaking, these theorems are not obvious at first using these axioms, but they are very useful for testing ideas. So it's like, okay, how do I know that this theorem in mathematics is actually reliable? Well, let's see if it obeys the axiom. Let's see if I can derive this theorem from the axioms. That's how I can prove the theorem. That's called proofs in mathematics. Now, if you're not a math guy, you could also use the same principle, for example, in areas like economics, right? like the law of demand, the law of supply, rational behavior, right? All these ideas. You can start to derive different theorems, we could call it that, or applications from these basic assumptions. So axioms are just assumptions. That's all they are. They're just basic assumptions that you start off with, and then you build from there. All right, quick parenthesis. Don't think you have to apply axiomatic thinking to the subjects I previously mentioned, math, physics, economics. These are just subjects that best align with axiomatic thinking. If, however, you are taking a more formal course on any of the subjects I mentioned, where the content is not presented in an axiomatic order, but more of a practical order, you can still use axiomatic thinking to question a particular concept you're learning in that course to trace it back to its roots. This can allow you to learn the why behind a concept that the course might not explain. This will provide you with new connections and an overall stronger understanding of the subject at hand. You should try to balance this with the course so as not to fall behind the course you are taking. So that's axiomatic thinking, and yeah, spoiler alert. Now we're going to talk about my favorite mental model. So axiomatic thinking is not very practical for other areas. I mean, you can, in theory, use it for pretty much anything, but the problem is it's like I said before, the conclusions are not very obvious from the axioms, from the assumptions, right? But if you're doing mathematics, it's very useful. If you're doing physics, it's very useful. If you're doing philosophy, it's very useful. But if you're not doing any of those, then it's probably not very useful, in my opinion. But there are certain principles within axiomatic thinking, and obviously this is going to prioritize theory over experience. Very important principles that are going to be very helpful for our next mental model, which is first principles thinking. Now, first principles thinking is my favorite mental model. Now, in first principles thinking, we're combining synthetic thinking with axiomatic thinking. And maybe a little bit of experimental thinking, right? We're synthesizing. First principles thinking is interesting because here we're also prioritizing experience over theory, similar to experimental thinking. But we're approaching it from a very axiomatic style, kind of like axiomatic thinking. And we're also synthesizing different ideas. What are we basically doing? So a concrete example of this, and I love first principles thinking for this, we're just basically starting off with an idea, starting off with a fact, starting off with something, right? It doesn't matter. We're not starting off with axioms. We're not starting off with a set of assumptions or basic axioms and then building from there. No, we're starting off with an idea, with one thing, with just something, or maybe a project, whatever it is. And we're trying to deconstruct that project or deconstruct that body of knowledge down. So if you want to learn economics, if you want to learn physics, if you want to learn philosophy, if you want to learn how to martial arts, if you want anything, whatever it is, we're starting off with something and we're going to break that thing down into its most fundamental components. So I want to learn how to play soccer. Okay, how does that look like? What are the attributes of a soccer player, right? A soccer player kicks a ball, a soccer player runs, right? What is running, right? What is the motion of running? Okay, so running, really, what is running? Okay, that's when you get into running mechanics. Okay, so how can I improve my running? But what is like, back to the soccer player example. Soccer player is comprised of the technical skills and the physical skills. Okay, so what is the technical skills? Okay, what does a soccer player do? Okay, he kicks the ball. Why does he kick a ball? Probably because he wants to pass the ball to a teammate, or probably because he also wants to score a goal. Is the way that I kick a ball to pass the ball to a teammate different to when I'm trying to score a goal? Probably, yeah. Yeah, it is different. One, you're kicking harder, and the other one, you're kicking not so hard. How does that look like? What is the technique? What is the technique between the two? Okay, so we have, let's call the idea of kicking the ball to pass it to another teammate, let's call that passing the ball. And the idea of kicking the ball in order to score a goal, shooting. So we have passing and we have shooting. What other things do you do with a ball? You're also running with the ball. Let's call that dribbling. So we have shooting, we have passing, and we have dribbling. So we can basically break down the basic things that a soccer player does. And there are different ways a soccer player does this as well, because some soccer players prioritize more shooting, Others prioritize more defense. Others prioritize more passing. Okay, so now we're getting into positions. Okay, but let's not focus so much on the technical. Let's go now more on the physical side. A soccer player also needs to be strong, but not so strong that he's super massive, because he'll end up sacrificing his speed. So a soccer player needs to be fast. What does it mean to be fast? So, right, we're questioning things, right? How can I become fast, and what is fast? What is speed? We're getting a little bit into physics, right? See how things start to connect? So we're talking about soccer, we're talking about sports, but now we're connecting into physics. You know what speed is. Speed is just change of position with respect to time, right? So you're changing your position with respect to time. That's what meters per second is. That's what kilometers per hour is. That's when you actually had to learn a little bit of physics when I was trying to improve my speed. Because now I have a metric that I can use to measure my speed, or my average speed. So, okay, how can I improve my speed? But it turns out that I cannot, that when you get into the soccer game, right, into the athletic game, you realize that it's not so much about just being fast, but you also have to be able to slow down really fast. So that's when you get things into like acceleration and deceleration. How can I change my speed with respect to time? Because it's not just about being fast. It's about how can I reach my top speed as fast as possible, and how can I slow down without losing my balance as fast as possible. So now we're talking about agility. Now, how can I change my direction? How can I improve my foot coordination? So all of these are the basic components that compose a soccer player's skills and abilities that we just broke down. And now we want to build back up. We want to build back up. Now I want to, okay, now that I have an entire map of all the basic components, what do I do with this map? Now you can start defining, okay, what was my original project? My original project was maybe to become a better striker. Okay, so now that I have this nice map, let's just focus on the basic components that correspond to a striker. Another example. Let's say I want to learn how to invest. Well, then I'm probably going to have to understand what investing means. What does that mean? Well, there are many ways to invest. There's real estate, there's trading, right? And then you get into things like Bitcoin, crypto. Okay, but we'll slow down. What does it even mean to trade? What does it even mean to place a trade? Let's focus on that. Then we can focus on all the other trading strategies that are out there. Because when you use this style of thinking, you can actually remove all the noise that is out there. Because if you're learning, for example, things like business, I recommend a channel called Alex Hormozi. And what I love about Alex Hormozi is that he's using actually first principles thinking. I don't know if he realizes this, but he's breaking the concept of business to its basic components. And that is what allows for him to communicate to his audience, particular certain business concepts at a very interesting, but at the same time high level, because it clears out all the noise. Because there's so many like side gigs and stuff on making money online out there, right? There's trading crypto, there's doing this and doing that, and there's just so much noise out there on how to make money online. But if you just start with the basic question, okay, but what is money? What does it even mean to make money? What does it even mean to start a business? What is a business? If you start off with those basic questions and you actually answer them properly, you could really start to just cut out all the noise that is on social media out there on money making ideas, on becoming a millionaire in 90 days. You can really just cut off all that noise, and it just gives you a sense of peace and confidence, which is what Alex Hormozi does. Honestly, if you just want to watch a channel on business, I highly recommend his channel. That's probably the best channel out there in business, in my opinion, because he cuts out all the noise. He actually starts to define business, define money, define making money, to cut out all the noise, and then you can actually start to build from there. And that's just another example of business. Another example is for learning anything. First principles thinking, dude, you can apply that for anything really. That's the beauty about it. So axiomatic thinking, that's mainly for if you're learning mathematics or philosophy, or even physics, even theoretical computer science, but those high level subjects. But it's not very practical to use axiomatic thinking to become a soccer player. It's not like there are the axioms of being a soccer player, right? No, it doesn't work that way. Oh, what are the axioms of soccer that I can derive? It doesn't work that way, right? So, or synthetic thinking. What is the perfect training plan to become a better soccer player? There's no perfect training plan. You have to experiment. But you don't just experiment, you also have to iterate, right? You have to iterate, because experimental is not just taking action. If you just take action, great, you'll learn, but you're not going to learn at a faster rate. What you want to do is you want to combine experimental thinking with these two mental models. So these two mental models give you first principles thinking. You want to take action, right? Again, with the example of becoming a soccer player, you want to take action, and then you want to question. It's like, okay, I am kicking a ball. What is my goal? My goal is to become a soccer player. I buy myself a ball, right? I'm starting with my assumptions. I'm starting with experience. I'm starting with common sense, what I know, what I've been taught about soccer. I'm starting with that, and I'm just experimenting. I experiment for a little bit, and then what I do, I ask questions. Is what I'm doing the right thing? Right? I don't know, but let's find out. What does it mean to play soccer? What does it mean to kick a ball? What are the different components that I can extract? How can I break the experience of being a soccer player to its fundamental components? And then try experimenting again. And then let's actually do some research, right? Theory. What are different ways to improve as a soccer player? And then I could probably add that to my body of knowledge that I use in first principles thinking. Not so much axiomatic thinking. Again, it's not very practical for being a soccer player, but that's how you could probably use a combination of these three. And same thing for learning any other skill or any other endeavor. Philosophy, for example. First, philosophy, it's like you probably are not going to use so much experimental thinking, but you are going to be using a lot of first principles thinking and axiomatic thinking. So you're going to be like, okay, you probably are going to be like Descartes, doubting everything. But what is the one thing that I cannot doubt, right? My main axiom, I think, therefore I am. So the one thing I cannot doubt is my existence. So I could probably start from there and use logic and reason to derive other philosophical theories. Or maybe I don't have to use axiomatic thinking. Maybe I can start off from an idea, from a belief I have. Or maybe I believe in God. Let's question that. Let's question the existence of God. Let's what does that look like? What would the world look like if God didn't exist? Is it possible for God not to exist? Is it possible for him to exist? So what is God actually? How do we even define God? Is God just some kind of sky deity in the sky? Like, is he just some kind of being in the sky sitting in the clouds? Probably not. What is God? Well, if we think about it, God is a being like us, self-aware. God probably has knowledge. We have knowledge. So God's knowledge is probably maximum. So he's probably omniscient. We can have power. In other words, we're very powerful. But wait a minute, what is power? Power we could probably define as imagining something into existence. Okay, we can have certain power. I can imagine an apple into existence. It will take time and effort to imagine apple to existence. All right, I'll probably have to get up from my chair. I'll have to go to the store, pay money, and get an apple, right? There's a set of actions that limit me from getting an apple. And the less time it takes me to get that apple, the more powerful I am. For God has instant power. So we can say that he is maximally power. He's everywhere. He's omniscient. So we can define God as a maximally great being that has all the attributes of a regular contingent being and possibly more to its maximum extent. I'm not going to get into that, but that's just some basic idea. Okay, now that we've defined God, we're using first principles thinking. Now that we define God, how do we know if he exists? So we're just asking questions. First principles thinking is about asking questions. It's taking a thing and breaking it down. So what is this? It's a water bottle. What is it made of? It's made of plastic. But there's also water inside the plastic. What is water made of? Probably H2O, right? 2 hydrogen, 1 oxygen. That's the atom that composes water. What is a hydrogen atom, right? What is an atom? What is a subatomic particle? What is smaller than a subatomic particle? Now we're getting into quantum physics just from studying this water bottle. And the same thing you could apply with any other human endeavor. And when you do this, you can actually connect different bodies of knowledge together. You can actually connect philosophy with science. You can connect science with theology. You can connect theology with sports, with whatever body of knowledge. You can actually make connections. And when you make connections, that's when you have knowledge. That's when you learn, theoretically. Experimentally, you learn when you change your behavior. Theoretically, you learn when you connect ideas. So that was all the theory that I needed to teach you today. What are some practical steps? I'll leave you with this basic exercise. It's because it's a lot that we, discussed in here. And yeah, it's just a lot. And really, it all boils down to these mental models. Because again, if we're trying to become Renaissance men, if we're trying to become polymaths, we need to first learn how to think. That's the starting point. Many people don't talk about this. It's like, oh no, you got to do this, you got to do that, execute this plan, read these books, do that. I'm not going to give you all that. First, let's learn how to think. Let's calm down, let's slow down, right? I think, therefore I am, right? Let's start off with, let's cut out all the noise, and let's learn how to think. If we learn how to think first, everything will follow. Everything will flow naturally. Because when you can think critically. If you can think critically, you can evaluate ideas. If you can evaluate ideas, you can cut the noise. And when you can cut the noise, you will not become a victim to scams. You will not become a victim to the education system. And you will not become a victim to anything really. You'll become powerful. And that is the end goal. The end goal is for us to become powerful individuals. Powerful individuals that can contribute to society, that can contribute to the AI renaissance. And that is the goal of all mind. So, that being said, here's the basic exercise. So, very simple. Nothing extraordinary, like nothing out of the blue. First, define a goal. Define a specific goal or area of knowledge that you want to learn. Second, see if you can find out which mental models best correspond to the goal or to the body of knowledge. Again, don't overcomplicate, don't overthink it. Because think about it. If you're overthinking, if you're in analysis paralysis, you're already assuming a particular mental model. See that? You're already assuming a particular mental model. You're trying to find the perfect plan. But that's synthetic thinking. But maybe that's not what I'm supposed to be doing. Maybe I'm supposed to be taking action. And then synthesizing. And then take more action. And then synthesize. Oh wait, but now I want to innovate. I want to create something new. Oh, well, let's break things down into its fundamental components and see if we can make different and new connections. Right? Maybe I want to learn engineering. Well, we got to experiment. Okay, after experimenting, let's actually go and do some research, and then experiment again, and then do some research, and then experiment again. Now I've learned engineering, but now I want to create something new. I want to build a startup. Oh, but now we got to do some thinking, some first principles thinking. Now we got to question things, break it down to the fundamental components. In fact, that's what Elon Musk did with SpaceX. He started to question what a rocket is, the basic components of a rocket, the economics of a rocket, and that's how he was able to derive a unique solution towards the high cost of building a rocket business, basically. But anyways, if you're learning mathematics or philosophy or anything, really, do some axiomatic thinking, combine it with first principles thinking, and experiment. It's really, there's no set in stone way to do this. You just need to take action, really. So try to find out which mental models do you think are best aligned with the goal or best aligned with the body of knowledge that you're trying to learn. And then 3, just take action. Take action, execute. Implement the chosen mental models in your learning process and execute your plan. You have to take a leap of faith at the end of the day. And no, this does not presuppose experimental learning. In a way it does, but if you really think about it, every human being begins to exist and experiencing stuff. And every human being is, if you think about it, the idea of analysis paralysis is absurd. It's absurd, unless of course you have to overthink something because it's high risk. But most of the time it's not high risk. It's not like before I go to my kitchen, I have to calculate the probability that there's an alien waiting for me over there to, it's not like I'm doing that. I just go to the kitchen because I don't have any reason to believe that there's an alien over there. Right? And it's pretty common sense. It's common sense if you think about it. But not many, even though it's common sense, when it comes to things like structuring your goals or learning how to do something, people think that way. They get into this analysis paralysis of what is the perfect thing I need to do. And hopefully this will actually help you clear a lot of noise. So I'm not going to give you 10 resources, the 10 best books. No. No. Do some thinking on your own. This is going to be painful. It's going to hurt, but it's going to help you grow. So that is the basic exercise. This is what I challenge you to do. Do it for the next 30 days or so, and you'll find out that, hey, this is actually pretty helpful. Or, hey, this, even if you can just extract something from this exercise, I would have done my part. So now, if you don't know what goal or area of knowledge you wish to learn, if you're like me, a polymath, and you're trying to find out how to juggle so many interests, then that is going to be for a separate video. But this guide was specifically to learn how to think. I introduced you to the AI Renaissance, the purpose of this channel, and we started off somewhere, which is learning how to think. Now I'm going to talk about how to apply these mental models more in depth later on, and how I'm personally, because again, this is just me documenting my journey, how I'm going to be applying these mental models to learn artificial intelligence, which is my area of interest. And the idea is to learn everything. But first I want to start with AI, because if I can learn AI and use AI to help me think better, to enhance my thinking, because we want to use technology to enhance our thinking, then we can pretty much learn everything, like everything. Think about it. If we can find a way to use AI, to use technology to personalize our learning experience, to personalize our mental models, then, bro, we can learn anything, and fast and efficiently. Not by rote memorization like in the school system, but actually like learning something, and apply this to every area of our lives to really become modern day Renaissance men. So that's it for this video, and I hope you got some value out of this. Done.